Council of Tuesday, April the 21st. And before I go on to the agenda, so Ian Poole, you've got your usual standing crowd for the financial reports.
Awesome.
But before we go on, Ian Jakes has just stopped by to say his goodbyes, and I don't know, I assume for those who don't know, Ian is going on to other pastures with New Westminster and Burnaby. And I want to take this opportunity to personally thank Ian for his service to our community. I think it's very difficult in a small community to be an editorial writer. People know where you are. At least in Burnaby and New West, you'll be able to hide. I wonder if there's a story that stands out in your 12, 13 years that really stands out for you as something that you covered in that time. That I know you've covered a lot of territory.
Yeah, lots of territory, Wayne. I mean, I think, one of the great stories, I think, was finally when the recreation referendum was approved, and we were able to build facilities here that I think the whole Sunshine Coast is very, very proud of, and I know worked decades before I got here to create. Obviously, there's been countless of other events and activities that we've covered. Unfortunately, some tragedies too that stick out in my mind. Some serious accidents. The plane crash on Thornbury Island obviously was a big provincial story that I was a part of. The Christensen Village shooting. I was on my way down here to actually cover a Chamber of Commerce meeting when Bob Hoy ran out of the Cedars Inn, and I happened to be driving up, and he's like, "You won't believe what's going on," and that my world just went from covering the Chamber of Commerce annual general meeting to just an incredible, impactful story for this community. So lots of highs, lots of lows, but at the end of the day, I'll remember a lot of, obviously, all of the highs and all of the great people that I've had the good fortune to interact with, to get to know on both a personal and professional level. And for me, it's definitely going to be the people. And I hope everybody read my column on Friday's paper. I meant every word of what I wrote there. It's truly been an amazing community, an amazing 11 plus years for me, a very impactful time in my life, and has propelled me to the next step in my career. And I'm hoping that this is a big leap of faith for me, but it's an exciting time for me and my family and my extended family. Everybody's pretty excited that I'm coming back to the Lower Mainland and such. So I thank you all and all the previous members of council and staff that I've covered over the years. It's been an amazing time, and you're in good hands with the current staff, and whoever takes over as editor, I'm sure will pick up the ball and run with it and create an even greater vision for the paper and for the community as a whole. So I thank you, Wayne, for your thoughts as well.
You're certainly to be congratulated on how that paper has really grown under your stewardship, and I congratulate you for that. As I said to you before the meeting, it's hard to find a copy in the boxes after about 4 o'clock on Friday because people wait for them. Two things I'll comment on that'll be missed, I guess. One, when we host the local government shows, you take up most of the airtime, which is appreciated. And then lastly, Grandma's is probably going to go into receivership.
You might, yeah. I'm going to miss a lot of good people down there too. So, as I said, a lot of good memories and really, really good people. This is a special place, and it's going to hold a special place in my heart forever. So, thank you. I wish everybody the best of luck, and I will definitely be reading from afar. So, and I know the new editor and Jacob and Christine are certainly going to be reaching out to me for a few things, at least for the foreseeable future, as they find their feet too with new staff. So, and be a chance for me to come back and visit too. So that'll be fun as well.
Well, thank you to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm saying that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so move on, just ask for a motion to approve the agenda, please. Councillor White, Councillor Valeria, in favor? Carried. Motion to adopt one set of minutes as well, please. Councillor Sanjanko, Councillor Valeria, all in favor? And that's carried. We'll move straight to delegations. We have Mr. Cox here. Ian, do you want to introduce Mr. Cox, please?
Thank you, Mayor Rowe. Yes, Bill Cox is a partner with the audit firm BDO Canada LLP and has been our auditor for a number of years. Bill's got tremendous experience in the field of public sector auditing and reporting with both local governments, and it's always great to have him, knowing that he will have the answers if we don't have them initially. So I thank him for that.
Great, thank you. Is this, that sounds like it's on?
Yeah.
So I know we got a couple of new counselors this year, so you may not realize that this is actually the best meeting of the year. This is if you only go to one, this is the one to go to, the one where the auditor's present. So I'm being a little facetious, obviously. Ian and I were talking before about just the financial statements, which we're going to talk about in a second, and they get a little more technical every year. They get thicker every year. There's more pages. There's more statements every year. So they're hard to digest in short order. So this is a tough task for you to do. I'm going to speak to a couple of highlights. We don't have a ton of time either. I asked the mayor for 7.5 hours on the agenda that we could plan that request. So we're gonna talk about a few high level things, and I know Ian might want to jump in and make some comment, but let's jump into it. There's two documents that you have. You have draft financial statements that say, what do they say here? They say Gibson's financial statements. You've got those, and you also have a letter from us that has a picture of City Hall in the front. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes on each. Let's start with the financial statements, because these are more important. This is your reported results for the year, and there are some things we can learn from looking at those numbers. There's page numbering at the bottom of those as well. The third page, page 3, is something called the Independent Auditor's Report. So this is the one page in the statement that is us. All the other pages are your own information. And the wording in this report says, in the opinion paragraph, it says, which is near the bottom, it says, in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the town of Gibsons at December 31st, 2014. That's your fiscal year end, and the results of its operations for the year that ended. So that's what's known as a clean audit opinion. So we anticipate that we will be signing a clean audit opinion, which is what this draft is. The reason why it's draft and not signed by us yet is that we cannot complete our work until council approves the financial statements, which may actually happen today. So once you approve the financial statements, then we have a little bit of work to do after that, which is things like contacting your lawyers one more time, just to see if anything significant has happened since the end of the year till today. As I say, that's called subsequent events review. We do that, and then we're 100% done. So right now we're 99% done. Very unlikely that anything would change from what we have here. The page after that, page 4, is called the Statement of Financial Position. And this is a very summarized, you see there's not a whole lot of lines on that. So this is a very summarized snapshot of where your finances were at the end of the fiscal year, December 31st, 2014. Maybe find that one. So it's the one with all the numbers in it.
You got a copy of the financial statements?
They were sent email to all council, and I had 2 extra copies that I distributed earlier, but Councilor Lumley had his.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
Yeah, we can share that, great. So as I was saying, these are very summarized. There's lots of activities, as you know, that the town undertakes. There's a water utility, sewer utility. So in this statement here, everything is consolidated all together. This is the overall financial position. These also look, anybody who's familiar with private sector, private company financial statements will notice that the format of these is a little bit different. So in the private sector, this statement is called a balance sheet. Here we call it the statement of financial position. And it doesn't actually balance anything. It just comes down to a number right at the bottom that says accumulated surplus. And that number at the bottom is kind of a big number. It's 2014, which is the first column there of numbers, says it's a little over $42 million. So this says you have accumulated surplus of $42 million. This is a format that's required by the standard setter, something called the Public Sector Accounting Board. I find the terminology is not my favorite, because that terminology, accumulated surplus, sounds like just what it says, there's surplus, but there actually is not a lot of surplus all year round. Fortunately, that's referenced to note 8, so if we could flip a few pages forward, let me find out what that is. I think that's page 13. Thank you. There's a note that breaks down the accumulated surplus. So even though there's a total of $42.4 million in surplus, the vast majority of that is something called investment in tangible capital assets, $39.5 million. What that represents is what you've already spent on infrastructure, on roads and vehicles and computers and all those good things. So that's already spent. So that's not available for spending. It's already been spent. And that's why I don't like that terminology, surplus. The reason why it's there and not expensed is because we expense that over the life of the assets. So that amount will grind down over the years as the assets wear out, and then we'll add more to it as new assets are purchased. But the important thing to note is that money's spent, so it's not money that's lying around that can be spent. In that note, the 2 lines above that are are closer represented to cash. So there's something called the current fund, and this is the balance in all the funds. Again, this is all consolidated. So really what that is that's your working capital. That's how much you have available for some of the timing of the ups and downs during the year. You know, your revenues don't come in at the same time, as you know, property taxes come in one big chunk. So you need to have a little bit of extra surplus working capital around to ride those ups and downs. So that's a pretty reasonable level on a consolidated basis. It should be noted, though, if you look at some of the individual funds, and we won't go into that, but all the information for the fund statements is in the back of this big package. The water fund, for example, is actually in a deficit position of $198,000. So that tells you the water utility needs some help. I know that's something that the town has been working to. And the middle item there, the reserve fund. Reserve fund represents funds that you've earmarked for specific purposes. $761,000. One of the purposes reserve funds are used for sometimes is for saving for replacement of assets. And as you know, $761,000 will not go very far in terms of replacing your $40 million worth of infrastructure. So that tells me that there's not a great deal of savings that have been undertaken for replacement, and this is another challenge that council will have to face over the next few years. So I know that's a lot of numbers, but I wanted to just make sure I drove home the point that accumulated surplus doesn't mean you've got money to spend. Now, if we can go back to that statement of financial position again, page 4. I don't want to go through all the line items, but there's another item that I wanted to make sure I pointed out on this statement. That's about 2/3 of the way down the page. There's a line called net debt, and it's the number is in brackets, 4,592,907. And if you're not an accountant, really the only thing you need to know about accounting is that brackets are bad. So anything with brackets is not good. So what that means is that your total liabilities, so things that you owe to others, like suppliers, like debt to the MFA, all those things exceed the assets that you have that are cashable, things like cash and receivables and investments. So there's more liabilities than there are cashable assets. Of course, you have all that infrastructure, which is wonderful and it's needed for the town, but you can't go and sell a water main to make money to pay off liabilities. So, so what that means is with the net debt position being negative, it means that you've got to, over the next few years, find a way to work yourself out of that. You spent some money that you haven't had yet, and you've got to raise some more money over the next few years to get that back to a positive position. It's not, although it sounds somewhat dire, it's not all that uncommon with local governments. There are local governments that are in a negative position like that. There's some that are positive. So it doesn't mean that the doors are going to be closed and locked tomorrow or anything like that. But it's just an indication that over the longer term, you've got to turn that around to some degree. That was really all I wanted to cover on that page. And I think the other page that I'll speak to is the page following that, which is the statement of operations. So that first page we just looked at was a summary of your financial results and your position at the end of the year. This one is how you did during the year. On this page, there's 3 columns. The first column is the called fiscal plan, which is your budget, and then the middle column is your 2014, your actual, and the right column is a comparison to 2013, so you can always see how things have changed year to year. From a big picture point of view, the third line from the bottom is called annual surplus. Again, we have to use that surplus wording, which I don't particularly like, but that tells you how you did for the year. So the first column, you budgeted for a small surplus. The middle column has brackets around it, so as we learned a few minutes ago, brackets are bad. That means that you actually ran a $395,000 deficit for the year, which wasn't planned. A few unforeseen things contributed to that. I made note of a couple here. There was some infrastructure spending that was in the budget was planned to be a capital addition. A capital addition is written off over a number of years, but if it's determined that it doesn't materially extend the life of the asset, it was just a repair and maintenance item, it gets expensed during the year. So there was $242,000 worth of that. $50,000 in unexpected marina legal work, and the biggie, and the one that's caused a bit of a problem in the water fund, is the boil water notice and reaction to that, the costs that were required to deal with that. That was about $350,000. So all of those unplanned items popped up and bit you this year and created a $395,000 loss for the year. So I know that's a very high level overview, and there are lots of numbers, as I say, but those are probably the big picture things. I circled a few other things, but I don't think there's anything I necessarily need to speak to. Is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, if I could, Bill, you did, back when you were talking about the accumulated surplus, which is note 8, that one line item said reserve funds, we have about 800,000 that you were saying is not a lot of money to replace assets that are worth nearly 40 million. you made a comment to me earlier today when you do a number of municipality audits, a number of them fairly, on the smaller side like ours. You were noting that is a very, I guess, typical position other municipalities are in this having very little cash to replace their longer-term assets.
Yes, yeah, thank you. So that was a little bit of research that we did to try and see. Everybody, I'm sure, has heard the buzzword of the infrastructure deficit, and it hits different municipalities to a different degree. And we did a little bit of research based on the BC stats of all the municipalities in BC. Based on the size of the municipality. And a lot of the larger municipalities, although they have big dollar problems, they also have some pretty good savings and some pretty good plans. When I looked at the municipalities around the 10,000 and under population range, they were all, as you said, Ian, in a position where there's not a lot of availability for saving for the future. They're going to have to turn it around to be able to save for future infrastructure replacement, and you're just like your peers, you're faced with that same challenge. So you're right, you're not necessarily in a worse position than other smaller municipalities, but it's just something, I just want to make sure I put it on the radar for you. As I say, it's not going to, nobody's going to come lock up the place tomorrow, but over the long term, that's something you're going to have to wrestle with.
My question would be that the general department expenditures, like the increase from the budgeted amount, is that all, is that also related to the water issue? Like for accounting purposes, you would take all those expenditures completely related to the boil water advisory and put them in the water system. The department expenditures increase would that include extra work by those departments related to that?
Yes, there would have been some of the admin costs that we would have incurred, but a lot of the expenditures really did happen in the water fund with respect to certainly our crews. Whenever our crews devote their time to one of the particular utilities, in this case water, we would charge their time to the water. So the water utility did experience their share of staff costs, but more on top of that, we bought additional water from the SCRD. We had additional testing through all that time, and then there was the meeting the conditions of the boil water of the drinking water officer was to put chlorination in place, and all of those sorts of things have been, and not all of that was expense because some of those are tangible capital assets, but there are a number of items that we didn't have planned for. Certainly with the general departmental expenditures, it's probably more a reflection of settling the arbitration award with the marina that caused that change, and also when what we actually see is the processing, the development of the George. So we had over $100,000 in costs that was pertaining to the George that would be expensed in general government. However, we recovered those funds fully from the developer, but those were shown as revenues or donations, so they get shown above the line there as revenue. So both on those cases, the actuals would appear higher than their budgeted. So net story with the George was it didn't cost the taxpayers anything, but when you're comparing line items, you see these kind of variations.
Any other questions on the statements for myself or Ian? If not, I'll flip to our report, which I want to just highlight a couple of things in that. So this report, this is the one that has a very faint picture of City Hall in front. It says Town of Gibson's audit results and communications. Report from your councillors. So a few things in here I wanted to point out. just rereading this again, thinking that there was a couple of things that sounded pretty ominous in here. There's page numbers on the bottom of that, and on page 7, starting on page 7 and page 8 as well, there is a table of what we call audit risks. And the point of this was to highlight, the map statements that we just took a look at. You saw how thick they were and how many pages of numbers there are in there. As auditors, we do not audit all of those numbers in the statements equally. There's more focus spent on some areas than others, and the areas where we spend more time on are what we call high-risk areas, because due to the nature of the items, they're either complicated or a large volume of transactions or require a lot of estimates. Due to the nature of those, we spend some more time in those areas, and that's what the items on page 7 and 8 are talking about. Again, I don't think I need to go into a lot of detail. It was more the fact that I wanted to make sure you're aware of the fact that the audit is focused on certain areas. There was one that I thought when I was rereading it here that I should speak to, because it sounds a little ominous, and this is on page 7, and it's called Management Override of Controls, and under the risk column it says, management is in a unique position to perpetrate fraud because of management's ability to directly or indirectly manipulate accounting records and prepare fraudulent financial statements by overriding controls that otherwise appear to be operating effectively. When I read that again, even though I wrote it, when I read it again, I thought, boy, that sounds like we're being a little accusatory here, or we think there's a high degree of risk of fraud here. I just wanted to point out that that's an audit risk that we have to have in any audit of any local government or corporation or anything that we audit. We always have to consider the possibility of management override of controls. And what that means is the people at the top have to be the CEO, the CFO, the mayor, councillors, all have to be held to the same level of accountability as the line staff people do. Otherwise, the whole system falls apart, and you have a company like Enron or WorldCom that failed when the bosses thought they could do whatever they wanted to do. So part of our audit is making sure that the control systems that are there and worked on and carefully managed apply to everybody in the organization, that nobody's taking any shortcuts. So I just wanted to point out that we're not singling out Gibsons. That's something we do in any audit. And, fortunately, we have nothing to report there. There's no issues. Sort of on a similar bent, on page 10, we talk about fraud, and fraud is something that we used to, if we went back 20 years ago in the audit profession, at least so I'm told, I was only 6 years old at the time, but at that time auditors did not believe that fraud existed in their clients. Sure, there's fraud in the world, but our clients are all good clients, and fraud doesn't exist. Since that time, because of things, I just mentioned Enron, because of things like Enron and some of the other corporate failures, we've, as a profession, we've taken a position of realizing that fraud occurs in every organization, including my company, including the town of Gibsons. What you hope for is that the level of fraud is immaterial. So, something like taking home a package of Post-it notes would technically be fraud. It's not the end of the world. I'm sure it happens in my company, and it might happen here, but what we want to make sure as auditors is that fraud is taken seriously, and that there's good controls over any of the areas that are more susceptible to fraud. And that's things like areas where cash is collected and that sort of thing, that it's more susceptible to fraud. So our job as auditors is to say, where are those fraud risk areas, and is the town doing a good job of having some good controls in those areas? And if not, we would report to you that fact. And if we came across any frauds, no matter how small they are, and we'll talk about materiality in a second, if we came across any frauds that were numerically immaterial, like say they're $50, $75, we would still report it to you at this meeting. And fortunately, we have nothing to report, but I just want to make sure that was pointed out. two more things to point out quickly. I think I'm still somewhat on schedule here. Appendix C, which is on page 15, something called Summary of Unadjusted Differences. Again, the concept is more important than the detail here, I think. But our job as auditors is to say that the financial statements are fairly stated. So our very first task before we start doing any work is saying, well, what would it mean to be unfairly stated? We figure that amount out using audit standards. It's generally we apply a percent to your budget, usually around 2% of your budget, and we set that and we call that our materiality level. And the number that we used for this audit was $142,000. Because it's set by audit standards, although there's a little bit of judgment, it's mostly audit standards. That means that any set of auditors anywhere in Canada auditing any local government of about this size is using that same sort of materiality level. So you're not being audited any harder or lesser than any of your peers. This Appendix C, this lists all the differences that we came up with. So as we're doing our audit, anytime we have a difference of opinion or we find some evidence that suggests that a number that's different than what you have in your financial statements, we put it on our list, we add all of those up, and as long as they add up to less than $142,000, we're okay, and we still believe the financial statements are fairly stated. So this Appendix C highlights all the items that we came across. It adds up to $124,000, which is not material, and that's why we still have a clean audit opinion. It's a little bit higher than it might otherwise be because there's the second item on the list there says overstatement of rental revenue recognized in previous years. So there was just one item that is sort of caught up this year by $132,000. So it's a big, far and away the biggest chunk of that. So that's sort of a catch-up item. Technically, it's an error, so it was on our list, but it means that you're now caught up, and the end result is that you have your financials is accurate. So the overall total is accurate, it's just not technically in the right year. So again, I'm probably getting a little technical here, but the point is these items are not indications of sloppy accounting or problems with the accounting system. They're one-time unusual items on the list there. And the very last thing to mention is Appendix F, starts on page 21. This is a letter that we write to your to Ian, to your treasurer, and it's a result of the audit, and it's areas where we think that you can make some improvements in your internal controls or your processes. And we have just two items, and neither of them really relate to internal controls at all. So that tells you that we couldn't find anything to complain about with internal controls. So that's a good thing. We mentioned on the bottom of page 21, we mentioned something called contaminated sites, which are new accounting rules coming in. Somewhat complex in that they require a review of all your property holdings, and comes in for December 2015, and you're on track to be able to deal with that, which is good. Other municipalities haven't even started their work in that area yet, so you're ahead of the game there. And then on page 22, there's a point that says saving for replacement of infrastructure and best practice. I really sort of talked about this already, but this fell out of my research, where I had seen that really most smaller municipalities in BC are not in good shape in terms of their plans for infrastructure replacement, and so we list here a couple of best practices and some thoughts for how you might get going further with that. And at the bottom of page 22, there's an area called management comments, and I think this is good. This shows that management has already thought of these issues and has some plans underway. There's an you purchased some asset management software which will help in that regard, and there's a water rates study that was done in 2013 to deal with, as we mentioned, there's a deficit in the water fund, so the water fund in particular needs some help. So you're already underway in thinking So I think I might have gone a couple minutes overboard, so about that, Mr. Mayor, but I think that covers all the highlights.
Okay, thanks, Bill. I was initially very excited when I saw the one line in your report that the town had discovered some land that it didn't know it owned. It turned out we did know that we owned it, we just hadn't recorded it.
Sure.
This, I sort of shared this with you a bit before the meeting. This is a report from the British Columbia Water and Waste Association, which can be found on their website, which is www.bcwwa.org. And it's entitled Our Water Systems at Risk. And it did a study of the systems in British Columbia and found that fees are not covering the full cost of service delivery in most communities, or many communities. And many communities are vulnerable because they don't have sufficient reserves set aside for unexpected challenges as we had last year. And this is something that the council is working very diligently on to correct, as you pointed out there, and will continue to do so. The designation, was it FCA, Fellow
Fellow of the Chartered Accountants.
Was that a recent appointment? Or?
Well, yeah, thank you for noticing. Yes, I was just appointed elected this year as a fellow of the CA, so it's sort
of like a Supreme Court judge, right?
Sort of QC-ish. Is sort of
well, congratulations.
Thank you for noticing. That's great.
Yeah. Any further questions from council at this point? Okay, I know you got to catch a ferry to head back. Thank you very much.
I'd rather stay here, but yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Gibsons and District Chamber of Commerce. Got Donna and President David here. Welcome.
Thank you. Change glasses. You can either see my notes or I can see you. I've got one choice. So, I'm sorry our report was late this month. We missed the deadline, but we got it in. So I'm happy to answer any questions now or later if you haven't had a chance to look at all our material. I just wanted to go over a few things. It looks like we're looking forward to a very busy late spring and summer. Visitor numbers are up, and I'm hearing that from merchants and accommodations and so forth. Combination of good weather and low dollar seems to be in our favor. If the Queen of Surrey can ever get back on the route again, that would maybe help. The Mill's annual refit is upon us. They expect that this year the number of visiting trades workers will exceed 1,000 during the first 2 weeks of May. So if your maiden aunt is coming to visit, don't expect to book a hotel room for her or find a seat in the local restaurant, which is great news for local accommodations. I wanted to highlight that we're doing the Marine Trail grand opening on Sunday, June the 28th, in conjunction with Wendy and the town. We hope that you will be able to come, especially if you paddle there. Wendy will undoubtedly be giving you more details since she's helping us with this. The Sea to Sky Marine Trail will make Howe Sound much more accessible to paddlers, which is great. Howe Sound is this huge recreation and tourism opportunity sitting in Vancouver's backyard. And we're trying very hard to work with partners on both sides and either end of the sound to develop the area's potential. So this is one way to kick it off. Squamish is having their big launch on June the 14th. We're doing it 2 weeks later, and we're going to try for as much noise and traction and photos and attention as we can possibly get. About business walks, I brought you a handout tonight, and so I obviously don't expect that you read through all of this. There's a PDF version too with the links in it. I met last week with Cheryl McClay from the Provincial Ministry of Jobs, Tourism and Training, who is also here meeting with all the local governments on the coast. I gave her a tour of the soon-to-open Fuse Work Hub down in the Landing and the Mallard. and we talked about business walks, and she wants to come here and be here for ours, which is really great. So I'll be working with her just to iron out the last details on it. So right now we need to pick questions, pick a date, assign teams, and areas, and then we're good to go. So I've given you some sample questions, and you're welcome to get back to me later about that. I did some research on how other communities have conducted their business walks and what questions they use. And there's a really big variation. A lot of communities have used the 3 standard questions that the BC government put out, but lots of others went to 5 or 7, or there was one down in Wisconsin, they did about 15 questions. And so, you know, I'm thinking that probably 5 is around about the happy point, you know, between asking important questions and moving along. But we'll just look at them, and also look at the questions that were already in the business survey that went out with the town's business license renewals, just to make sure that we're not duplicating, that we are, you know, enhancing without duplicating. A date, I am thinking right now late May maybe, and perhaps a Wednesday or a Thursday, since so many businesses are closed on Monday, and Tuesday is obviously council, and the weekend is too busy, you know. So we'll set that up. I'll work with staff, and then if both the chamber and the town can get together to do some pre-publicity so that businesses are aware that this is going to be happening. And then we need to set up teams, and the way that it's usually done is that you have a team of 2. We can have a volunteer from the chamber and somebody from the town. And one person asks the question, the other one writes down the answers, which makes sense. I will talk to Cheryl and also to Dale Whedon at the BC Economic Development Association, just for a little advice on how many businesses 2 people can actually cover in 3 hours, so that we can lay out a territory for our walk. So I'm hoping that sounds good to you guys. And I also have Dave here to answer any questions that you have about the mini Maker Fair coming up on May the 29th. 31st. See, the noise kind of blown.
Okay, so yeah, thank you, Donna, for this sort of launching into this business walk, because actually we were talking about it again at our committee meeting earlier today, and as you and I know, it's something we've talked about from time to time. So it really is just a question of actually kind of picking a date and putting your hands up. And I from what I've seen today, I think council is fully in support and will participate. Yeah, I was wondering about the question of, you know, how, I mean, I guess ideally you want to connect with a business owner. I mean, you go to a business and the owner may not be there. So I think you kind of answered that by trying to promote it ahead of time, so that hopefully business owners will, you know, maybe be there that day or have somebody there that's in, you know, able to answer some of those questions.
Also, some of the other towns have put up the question online, so that if the business owner isn't there, that we can get their feedback later at their convenience.
Okay, well, that's good. David, do you want to tell us what the Makers Fair is about, so that it can be on the record here?
Sure. Right now we're in the phase of gathering our sponsors before we advertise publicly. That's why we're not advertising publicly until about May 1st. So there's sponsorship opportunities available for anybody that has businesses and are interested. A Makers Fair, sort of I don't know if everybody's aware of the Vancouver Maker Fair and what it's involved. Nobody knows? Okay. It's sort of like arts and technology innovation. It's experimentation and play with all the new technologies and materials that are being developed every day that's coming along, and a lot of breakthroughs happen in people's garages when they're playing. You know, it's like undirected experimentation sort of stuff. And this is an effort in supporting and encouraging that on the coast. There's lots of people doing lots of innovative things in the corners of the coast that people aren't aware of until they get on Dragon's Den, you know, like with sticks or cranked bikes, or there's dozens of businesses. So this is kind of a way of bringing them all out and showcasing them. And it's already working in the sense that as soon as we license the Mini Maker Faire logo, which belongs to this company called Maker Media, the producers of the Vancouver Maker Faire noticed, and they started calling people on the coast saying, hey, you got stuff going on over there? And they're going, well, yeah, you should come over. So they are starting to come over. So, you know, kind of engineers and geeks in the city are learning that there's a community here for them if they want, when they come around to raise their kids, they should maybe come over here to do it. That's kind of the plan. So right now we're gathering sponsors, and May 1st we'll start advertising publicly for the event.
Good, and you know, hats off to you for organizing that. Remember about 3 years ago, I was having coffee with a guy, and he said, there's these 3D printers that can print things in 3D, and I just laughed at him and said, not in my lifetime.
Well, it's neat that there's a large, the Coast Makers community is about 60 strong, and it has, you know, a dozen to 2 dozen really core members that come out all the time, and they're all sort of in their 30s, and they're all very competent and all very, very smart. It's kind of scary sometimes, but they know. So it's a fun group to work with.
Well, it's very, very exciting. I've said more than once that there isn't a week goes by that I'm not just kind of amazed by some of the talent that I run into on this coast. It's just for a community the size that we have here, it's pretty remarkable. Any other questions or comments, Chamber? Thank you very much for the work that you guys are doing. Appreciate it. Okay, so one more delegation, Linda.
Good evening. I remember when I was in my 30s. What we were inventing then seemed pretty amazing. I think I was inventing square inflations for goat milking machines. But that's another part of my life. I hope you all received the little packet that I sent to Ian. I will talk on music in the landing first. And for any of you who haven't been here around this along that's been going since 2003, if you notice in the history of it, it was introduced by Don Chapman when he heard somebody playing bagpipes at the end of the pier and thought that what a beautiful thing, we'd love to have live music out here for people to see. And Music in the Landing was born, and it was through Bill Beamish when he was here. And in his wisdom, he felt that it needed to hire somebody to organize that kind of thing instead of having a volunteer do it through the town. So Don put up the money for the music, the town put up the money for organizers, and myself and Graham Walker have been doing it ever since. So it's become a staple in Gibson's Landing. We do 5 shows every weekend, live shows outside, which is kind of can be stressful, but we only end up canceling about 1 every year. We've had them, we use that gazebo down on the wharf, and it's actually dry in there unless it's too windy, but we are very creative on how we make it work. But the program, when they hear the music, we can't pick which is our favorite venue, but that one down there, people hear it across the water, and people that come in here in the boats, they'll walk out on the pier and go, this is amazing. You know, a 360-degree music venue. So it's been going that long. We get great coverage of it. If you've read the report, Graham and I do all the schlucking around, and when we pay the musicians, often we have buskers, and it's $25 an hour. So rather than going through the whole bookkeeping process of checks and things, we pay by cash, and I keep a record of it.
You didn't hear the account, eh?
I did. They're very careful with records of everything. I say we get good coverage, we have to come up with our own advertising for it, and last year, District of Seashelt came in with their own program. They have coveted the music and the landing from Gibsons forever, and if those of you know me, I live in Seashelt, so they keep saying, Linda, come and do something for us. So when they decided to do it, I thought it would be great if we could do it so we're not in competition with each other, so that we complemented each other. So last year in our advertising we did that. We put both ads together and alternated who was on the top of the list each time, and I think it worked well. So it shows the Sunshine Coast community that music is uniting, for doesn't matter where you're coming from. I say we get good coverage. If you want to see the amount of books that I've got at home with all of this stuff, it's there. It'd be great to archive it at some point, and I'll do that when it's necessary. But a few years ago we went on Facebook, and I give you the link there. So now there's a documentation of every single show and every single artist that's actually on Facebook, as well as my hard copies of it. So I don't know if you have any questions. You're all familiar with the program? Yeah.
Councilor Sanjanko.
Linda, I do have a question for you. Thank you for all the work that you and Graham do. I think as a community, we're so proud of Music in the Landing. But my question is around succession planning. And I've asked you this personally before, and I'm going to ask it publicly. You're such a jewel, and I'm a little bit worried that just when you decide that you're not up for it anymore, are there any talks just about starting to mentor someone, or how we can put this into place?
Well, when Graham and I came on, the first thing, it was like they thought of us because we're doing Jazz Festival already. And I said, no, this has got to be a transparent process. So if something does happen that either he and I decide not to do it anymore, I think it needs to go out to advertising for someone to do it. We have all the records for someone to follow through, but it's really got to be a transparent way of doing it. And you don't know who's out there that can do this and bring fresh ideas to it and move on with it. And everything is in databases, and it's easy to share knowledge that way.
Yeah.
If I could, just for council's clarification, they did not get your report because I did not get your report. And I know we talked that there was to be distribution ahead of time, but I think with my focus on getting the financial statements to where they were, I didn't get a chance to connect with you. So I think we're going to have to follow that up and forward that report to them tomorrow.
I was just not going to publicly bring that up.
Oh, I sent it to him Sunday night, hoping it would be in your box on Monday morning.
Yeah, our staff works most of the weekend, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very good report.
Well, we will see it.
And do follow that link. You'll see all the people you know. And this program, I do another one, but this program particularly, since it's been running that long, we really emphasize youth. And in this program we have a youth showcase as well as other things. And you can see some of the kids when they're 9 years old or something. Now they're in their 20s and they're out there working with music as their main source of income now. It's a beautiful thing. So if you didn't get the report, it does say in there when they're held. We hold them Friday night, Saturday, and we started using the public market last year. And the town of Gibsons has purchased a 10 by 15 tent, which we use each year, and it does wear out. We use down in Weingarten Park that 10 by 15 pad instead of the big stage, because sometimes that stage is too big when you have a single performer on it, and we find the other one more friendly, and people stop by the bus stop as they're walking by and see it there. It just seems to be a much friendlier place to do it. So we hold that in and out for every performance.
Great. Well, again, as Councillor Sanjay was said, thank you and Graham for the work that you do on this. It's very much appreciated. Yeah, we don't have any problems with Seashell copying this by any means. In fact, earlier today, Council was talking about regional economic development, and there's very much I think a consensus around this council table that Sunshine Coast is one place. We're different communities, but nevertheless, when people from the outside come here, they look at the Sunshine Coast generally. So what we can do in one community helps the other as well.
Yeah, and if you know me through tourism and my other CCA things, that's what I'm all about too,
Yeah.
is the whole Sunshine Coast.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much, Linda. Okay. Any inquiries at this point? Yeah.
I think Linda has a presentation on Jazz Festival.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm still here.
All right. Yeah. Go ahead.
So you don't have this report either. It's a very good report too, I have to say. If any of you notice this branding, actually this was painted by a local Gibsons person back in 2002, Wendy Hartford, and we did a program getting artists to do these 4x8 sheets of plywood to do a poster as part of the program we ran through CCA. All of the arts and culture kind of go together, and we've been using it ever since. So the Jazz Festival we are in our 20th year this year. I moved here in 1995, and that's when the Jazz Festival started. I worked with the Vancouver Jazz Fest when it started, and still do go over there to volunteer at that one. We formed the Sunshine Coast Jazz and Entertainment Society in 2000, and that made it possible for us to apply for grants and those kind of things. In 2003, I think, we started making it larger into Jazz Week. The very first Jazz Festival was one afternoon in Dougal Park. From there, it has expanded. Jazz Week, we start the Saturday weekend before the festival, and we have live music in restaurants throughout the landing and Gibsons. We use the library, the galleries, and that kind of thing. And we hire local musicians to play at that. And it's very cool to walk into Cedars on a Wednesday night, and it's a full night. Same with any of the restaurants. People say it makes us feel like a big city where you can go out every night of the week to live music. And it just kind of pumps it up for the weekend. Jazz Weekend, we moved 2 years ago to the landing. We started a street festival on Saturday. We were finding that it wasn't growing any, and Dougal Park was a very convenient and wonderful place to have it. But if you're in the village, you have no idea where Dougal Park is. Even coming from Seashell, they don't know where Dougal Park is. So we talked to the businesses a few years ago when they had an association, and they were all for it. So we shut down the street, we put it there, and it's right in your face. So often businesses would say they didn't even know the festival was on when we had it over in the park. This way, it tripled our numbers of people coming into it. We wondered about how we were going to do it to charge people to come in. We use a wristband and honor. I never ask my volunteers to police anything. We charge them $20 at 3 different gates. If they want to come in and not pay, that's on their own conscience. And the people that have bought tickets look at other people going, isn't this great? Don't you think it's worth something? And so it's been good. It's increased our revenue. And if they're just walking through, it's like, what a great place to live. Last year, Soundworks purchased a stage, which has upped our presence quite a bit. In that report, I sent a couple pictures. I had a professional photographer last year take some shots. And the other thing with being in the landing, you're on that on that hill looking at the view that, as I'm sitting here, I mean, it's a view to die for. I had a call from Georgia Strait 2 days ago looking for pictures, so hopefully those pictures will show up, pardon me, in the festival. So this year it's on the 19th to 21st. Jazz Week will start on the 14th. And we've got some great entertainment coming. We are working with Public Market this year, and we've got Michael Acapinti and the Sicilian Jazz Project coming. We used that place when it was a yacht club 10 years ago, so it's great to be back. We're using it 2 nights in a row. The main stage, we're going back to some of our favorites like Hugh Fraser and all of that. We also incorporate local musicians in that as well. Sunday we have a free show in Weingarten Park, so it's open access to anybody. And we usually bring in the big band. We've got Mimosa coming and other groups. I try and keep it not real hard jazz for people that are out there just to sit in the sun and enjoy music. Michael Acapinti too, he's going to do a workshop with the Elphinstone High School students for their band. So Tom's very excited about that. We do jazz brunch on Sunday, which is always popular, dance Saturday night, and we end up with jazz vespers in the church at St. Mark's. So I don't know what else you would like to know. Do you have any questions on the Jazz Festival?
Councillor Valeria?
Thank you, Linda. I'm just wondering if you can tell us if there's any feedback from the landing businesses specific to closing the road. Last year was the first year?
Second
year. You mentioned that they're happy that they actually knew it was going on because it's much closer. Was there any resistance to road closure?
It worked both ways. 2 years ago, it happened to be the weekend after they paved the roads, so their businesses were closed down on the Thursday and Friday before it, and it was pretty stressful, I think, for the businesses and for everybody down there, and then we're closing it on Saturday again. They were really happy to do it. Last year, they were really pleased with it. We tried to encourage them to move their stuff out on the street. We have street performers. We've got the band Orchestra, what are they? Slivovika, and they march up and down the street playing horns and things. So there's both. Some do really well, some not as well, but they do agree it adds to the community. And this year they don't have an organized group down there, so we've been going to individual businesses.
Okay, Linda, thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. Okay, moving along, any parties at this point?
If you don't have it, let me
Well,
know.
if not, I'll ask for a motion to receive the minutes of the whole meeting of April 7th, please. Councillor White, thank you. Councillor Sanjanko, all in favor? That's carried. I think actually you need to make a statement for the record.
Just declaring a conflict of interest with respect to 8.1.1 grants of assistance. I am on the board of directors of Deer Crossing Art Farm Society, so I will be leaving the room while this, if there's any discussion and the vote takes place.
Okay, so these come out of the grants of assistance, which have been broken out in 2 sections, obviously for the reasons just stated by Councillor Valeria. So dealing with 8.1.1, do I have a mover then of that recommendation? Councillor White, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Lumley, thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, you can ask Councillor Valeria to return. Going on to 8.1.2, just make a comment. before that. Basically, for those who don't know, the town sets aside $20,000 for grants of assistance intended to help various organizations in our community with launching programs or helping them to keep things going that might not otherwise go. And this year, we had applicants for slightly over $37,000 of funds. Of course, we don't have that kind of money, so it was it was challenging for council to sort of try to apportion this, and we did it the best we can. And so any organizations that didn't get the funding they were hoping for, it's not because they're not worthwhile enterprises, it's just that some choices had to be made with limited resources. So with that precursor, 8.1.2, then just ask for a mover of that recommendation, please. Councillor Sanjanko, Councillor Valeria, all in favor? And that's carried. 8.1.3, that's fairly straightforward. This has to do with the Canadian Canoe Museum. It's been reaching out and with the assistance of our Director of Parks, Wendy Gilbertson's here, we'll be putting together a working group to try and look at a way that we can collaborate with the Canadian Canoe Museum so that they can share their items with us and how that might play out, and also to try to initiate some sort of project for the 150th birthday coming up in 2017. So just ask for a motion for that. Councillor Lumley, Councillor Valeria, all in favor? And that's carried. For discussion.
So
Yeah.
I don't have.
Go ahead.
No.
You're cool? Okay. 8.1.4.
Any discussions usually are part of it. Maybe somebody else has something.
Okay, remind me to ask for that. 2015 budget, this is to do with the setting the business tax multiple at a rate of 2.8214. So just by way of background, the town of Gibson set out about 2006 to work to reduce the business tax multiple, which is essentially what it is for anybody that's not familiar with it, is for $1,000 taxation that a resident pays, $1,000 of assessed value, a business pays 2.8 times what the resident pays for that same assessed value. In 2006, the town of Gibsons had a business tax multiple of 4.267, and we have steadily reduced that every year down to, last year was 2.859. This year it's coming down slightly to 2.82. We weren't really able to move it much more than that because of the challenges that you probably heard from the auditor's report earlier today or this evening, and we'll certainly continue to try to bring that multiple down, because the business taxes, I think, contribute probably well over 30%, or close to 30% of the taxes in this town. So this motion here then is to set that business tax multiple at 2.8214. Councillor White, Councillor Sanjanko, any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay. 8.1.5, update public places encroachment bylaw. And this is really just setting some fees for processing applications for encroachment onto public lands. And in this case, authorizing an encroachment on a retaining wall at 566 Marine Drive.
Mr. Mayor, I mean, perhaps Andrea wants to comment a little bit further. One of the sort of aspect of this bylaw that was sort of missing from the conversation 2 weeks ago, I guess, is that this is not sort of a license to encroach. This is for existing situations only, as opposed to sort of an encouragement to when we're talking about the retaining wall on Marine Drive as an example, that we wouldn't be sort of suggesting that everyone along Marine Drive, $25 processing fee, because all of a sudden the parking spot along Marine Drive. These are for unusual situations generally and for existing situations. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andrea, on that end, but I think that's an important point to highlight.
Okay, anything further? You move that, Councillor White, second. Councillor Nunley, all in favor? That's carried. 9.1. Wendy, there is something.
Do you want me to report on that?
Yes, because there's something more in this than what's in our previous discussions, so I think we need to know a bit more about that.
Yeah. Okay, so what you have before you is, I think it's 6 recommendations. There's 6 recommendations, 5 of them are fairly simple. There's, sorry, I just found that. Thank you, Ian. There's one there that's a real stretch. So you had Gordon Keever come from the Sea to Sky Trail. And what they would like to do is participate in this, but to participate as a full partner, they're looking for people to be able to kayak, canoe, or whatever around, and be able to stay in Gibsons. The closest place that anybody's going to be able to stay is down by the mill. And some people may not want to come all this way and then go back there to spend the night or whatever. We don't have tent and breakfast yet, Andre. Carriage houses, but we need tent and breakfast or something so people can stay, or hopefully somewhere close by for to Gibsons where somebody can actually walk into town, access the businesses and the services. So there's the 5th recommendation there. That's the only way that I could see at this moment that anybody could physically stay close to Gibsons and be able to access the landing area. One of the things that they're asking to do the grand opening on June 28th, and it looks like it's going to be at 3 o'clock, and that is because it's high tide. They're asking for the mayor to speak for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. 5 minutes, that's what they said. Chief Bill Williams and there'll be some area directors because Area F is also, and Area E is also participating in this. They were thinking of doing it at Armour's Beach, but it would be nice if we could do it on the Checkball lands. So I'm going to talk, speaking with Squamish on that to see if we can do it there. I'm waiting to hear back from Lisa Wilcox, and hopefully we'll have the venue nailed down by June 7th. So the other recommendations I think are fairly simple. Receiving a report that you support the Sea to Sky Marine Trail. They're asking for map signage, and we could do that in accordance with our sign bylaws or whatever. We could put a map down by the marina, or Gibsons Marina, another one down by Armour's Beach, because I can imagine some people will be dropping off canoes and kayaks that are local and finding parking and going off on the trail for a few days. So, and that they're asking that our logo be provided for on this map signage showing the different locations around the town, which I think is fairly simple. And that you support and attend the grand opening ceremony on June 28th.
Councillor White, move the recommendation. Okay.
It's the 5th one there.
Yeah.
It's the tough one. That it could open. I have trouble with that one myself, but I'd like to see somehow people being able to come and stay.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're opening a door here that we don't want to open. Do you limit it just to kayakers if you let these people do it? Who else can stay?
Yeah. This is one we probably should have some discussion on.
Sure.
Councillor St. Jacob.
Well, I definitely appreciate that the word trial period is in here. I was just wondering when you were talking, and if you considered this to the Squamish Nation about posting the grand opening event, would there be any discussion or possibility of discussion around working with them on this trial period at that same location?
There has been some discussion with them, and this hasn't come up just from this. This has been going on for about 3 years that we've talked about that. We're doing that other project down that's happening this year at Gibsons-Regular for the salmon and enhancement. They did have Frank Mahaney staying down there about 4 years ago when they started tearing down the buildings, and he was there as a watch person staying. And we did have that conversation at that time if the project didn't go through with the campground. And there has been some discussion on that, but things move very, very slowly.
Just a couple of thoughts, I guess. First one being that those engaged in a multi-day expedition to the Sound might be very keen on a warm bed and a shower at that point. So there is the B&B option. My other question, I guess, is around pitching a tent at the kind of high tide mark, which is essentially legal, is it not? I'm asking the question. I think it would be hard pressed to remove people if they were camped right at the high tide line on a beach. So that presents the possibility that you want them at least in one sanctioned place. But I think just that personally the complications potentially with having people pitch tents on any beach, we might want to steer people towards the B&B option if possible.
That is possible. There's affordability issues too for some people. I mean, they can't because they can't afford B&Bs and stuff like that. So you don't necessarily want to, put them off.
Councillor Bowman?
I guess that throws the block up on the economic development aspect of it, I guess. I have a few things. Parking, like you said, if people are going to be out on a 5-hour track, they're obviously they're coming over. Obviously, Gibsons is going to be a main point of access to the trail, I would imagine. If they're on the Sunshine Coast, or if they plan on being on the Sunshine Coast, so you might have some issues with respect to parking. I guess they park up on Armors, they're going to. The Sue's going to be on them in a second with the 2-hour parking. So there's those things, and maybe I'm being, selfish, but I can almost see if you invite the Sea Shelt to take like that whole land there, I could almost see. Oh, Squamish, sorry. I can almost see that's like prime, like you're saying, camping ground, and I certainly wouldn't want this to be access points for kayakers and kind of ruin what's there. I certainly wouldn't want them to put up a fence like they do on the road on the waterfront. So I'd be a little concerned about that. So those are a couple of things that I'd be concerned about.
Yeah, I think,
first of all, we're probably not talking about a great volume here, I suspect, to start with. I think what the concern in part is that, of course, as you know, many years ago, I actually had a little kind of a campground by what's now a ball field up in Brothers Park, right? And so really, what's that?
We had a donkey living there.
Yes, that's right. And our bylaw really is to give us clout so that we don't have people just camping on public lands. And this, we got to be careful what door we're actually opening here without discouraging this. So this is what I'm struggling with in terms of that, and I'm not quite sure what to do about it. As I said, I'm not anticipating it's going to be a heavy demand situation, at least certainly not initially. Maybe not at all. It's a fairly select group that would likely be doing that type of kayaking, which is fairly demanding, I think, if they're truly doing the marine trail. And I don't want them not to be welcome here, but at the same time, we've got somewhere where
We don't.
where it's not intended and there's other residents in the area. Councillor White?
The map showing the marine trail is pretty fresh in my mind because it was just presented at the SCRD actually earlier, just within the last week. And I recall, I thought that it showed camping on Keats, but it definitely didn't show camping in Gibsons.
Yeah, before your meeting last week, we had a meeting.
Okay.
And I noticed that on the map, it did show Keats, but apparently it wasn't secured.
Mm.
So, yeah, it wasn't secured. So there was only 3 secured sites.
Yeah, my thinking was there was
They
camping
showed a
there,
few
and
different,
and clearly Gibsons was shown as a place to launch, but it wasn't shown as a place to camp. So when I looked at that map, I thought, well, people would stay at B&Bs here or hotels, but they wouldn't have that camping option. Was my interpretation of it.
No, they showed some different sites on there, and there's only 3 secured sites that somebody could stay. And to me, if there was a way that, you could get people down this end, they're coming from the other side. That would be good.
I'm just following up on that. Isn't Plumper Cove a provincial marine recreation site?
They have a campsite there. Okay, I only see it on a boat there.
I'm getting a nod in the background that there's a campsite
Okay,
there.
yeah, so that's cool.
I think we might derive some of the economic benefits, people stopping for the day and loading up on supplies and then heading back to somewhere like Plumper Cove.
I'm going to suggest that personally that 5th item that maybe it just be left out for the time being. I'm not saying to rule it out, but maybe we can wait to see what what actually comes of this before we sort of go down that route. Anyway, Councillor Lemon.
I'd have to go back on my notes, but I was pretty sure that the presentation was he wanted like a plaque or one kind of area where it was just like, this is the Gibsons kind of like launch point, or the way I read this. Anyway, if that's the intention, I'd almost, if you're going to be putting maps and launching points at several areas, I'd almost be concerned with that as well. But I wouldn't have a problem with at the wharf or wherever that launch point was. But I'd be concerned with several different maps at several different locations. That'd be my concern.
Yeah, some of it depends on who the user is too. If you've got somebody who's going to be going on a tour and they go down to see the sky kayaks, I mean, they can park there and they can go from the tour there. That's private parking.
Mm-hmm.
For somebody who's local, they could go down to Gibsons Marina because that's a public launch. It's a free launch. They can launch, but they can't park there. They'll have to find another spot close by. I imagine some people may, because they're just used to using armors, we do have kayaks and stuff that go from there now, but they'll want to go from there. Another area that Headlands Road at the end there around Bay Road, a lot of people go from there. A lot of people in the neighborhood, and people do tie up their canoes and stuff and just leave them there for the summer. So there'll be different access points possibly being used. And you are right, they want one designated.
So, Councillor Lumley, though, are you referring more to the number of signs? Is that what you're concerned that you're raising? In that second,
Yeah.
Where it says approve the installation of trail maps at appropriate water access points. Is that the point you're raising?
Yes.
So, how many do you contemplate, Wendy?
Oh, I would like to limit it to maybe 2.
I would think so.
That, for the sea to sky kayaking place, I think, they could promote that and put signage on their own property there regarding that.
Sunshine
So I
Coast
thought
kayaking,
Gibson's
right?
Marina.
Sunshine Coast kayaking?
Yeah, Sunshine Coast, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's right. And then the wharf, I think the guy wanted one, he's on the government dock.
that was his intention, so.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think Councillor Lumley's concern is just he didn't want to see a proliferation of signs
Neither do
out
I.
there. That's what you're talking about. Okay. So, am I off base on this camping part? I mean, are we, I mean, it seems to me that it would be very easy for you to come back to council just about any week if you were suddenly finding you're getting some demand here and say, you know what, maybe we do need to do something.
I anticipate that there will, regardless of what we do, there may be one or two people just, come around and just throw a tent somewhere. I mean, we get that now. But I anticipate that may happen, but we don't need to encourage it.
I'll try moving this again, but without that, the fifth clause there. I think that's a good suggestion. That we just monitor the situation. Okay. I think that might.
Okay.
Because we can certainly review that at any time if you deem it appropriate.
Okay.
All right. So with that, then is there a seconder for that, Councillor Sanjanko? All in favor then? Okay, Mr. Perry, thanks for your work on that, Randy.
Okay.
9.2 and 9.3, I've been asked to change the word received to the word accepted. Apparently that's a statutory requirement, so it's just that the financial statements be accepted and the auditor's management letter be accepted. So I'll just ask for motion for those two, please. Councilor Delaria, thank you. Councilor White, thank you. All in favor? And that's carried. Any parties at this point? Oh, there's one.
Michelle March on Langdale. Just a comment and then a question. There are actually at least 24 camping spots over at Plum Cove, and it only takes maybe 10 minutes in a kayak to get there. So my question, I guess, to council would be, can we not make it as easy as possible for these folks to resupply and go over there? So where there is a sign, it should be easy to pull the kayak out of the water and walk to the grocery store and then back again, i.e. maybe Gibsons Marina. The public dock, the Harbor Authority doesn't let you pull up a kayak onto that dock. So it's something to keep in mind or to clarify with them, because the last thing you want is for people to come here and then told to go away. So.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, and I think, sorry, that, we can follow up with Wendy, but it's a good point that the signage that is posted, if we're not allowing camping, should make it very clear that camping is available just over there, and give people are pulling in and they're not to be camping here, then we need to point them in the right direction.
Through Mr. Mayor, we'll certainly do that. We'll draft something that is reasonable. I know that Donald, through the chamber, was working with some welcome signage as well. There's some decent ones, so we already have something roughly drafted that has all kinds of information. So we'll recognize that as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking about Ms. March's comment about pulling up the kayak. I wonder if through our liaison, if we could raise that at the next Harbor Authority meeting, just to see what the issue, if there's a kayak. Because again, I don't see it as being a huge demand, but maybe just because it would pretty much be summer, so it's only going to be when they have that summer dock out, I suspect. And just maybe sort of see what their concerns might be, if there's something that could be done about that. I don't know. Councillor Lumley?
Could be a liability issue. Somebody in a kayak, there's some pretty big boats that are cruising around there, so maybe they just want to do that. As well as, I'm going to follow up on Councillor Sanjanko's point. I mean, again, with the signs, that's probably like the people that are creating this park, it's probably isn't that their job to tell people where to camp? Or is this, are we taking on responsibility to direct people in this marine park? Is it our job, or is it their job? Or, we're going to have all these welcome signs. Am I going to be able to see the water for all these signs? I'd walk my dog down
Okay, thank you. All right, where are we? Yeah, where are we? That was the inquiries. Oh, that was the inquiry. Everybody commented. Thank you. Okay, one item of correspondence to receive, please. The motion to receive that. It's the auditor's, letter. Councillor White, Councillor Sanjanko, all in favor, and that's carried. 12.1 requires unanimous consent of council to give first, second, and third readings to the financial bylaws that are set out at 12.2 to 12.6. So first of all, ask for a motion to give first, second, and third reading to those. So, Councillor Valeria, Councillor Lumley, all in favor, and that's carried. I will now ask for a motion to give first, second, and third reading to the bylaws set out in 12.2 to 12.6 inclusive. Councillor White, Councillor Lumley, all in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. 12.7, Public Places Encroachment Agreements Bylaw, and that's just that be read for a first and second time. I've been through that one before. Councillor Sanjanko, Councillor Valeria.
Third as well.
Pardon me?
And third.
Does this be read a first and second time?
Yeah, that's correct.
Oh, sorry, are you doing the annual tax rate bylaw?
No, we've done those.
Oh, you passed them all in one.
Yeah, 12.2 to 12.6 were passed as one. So I'm on 12.7, which is first and second reading, right? So who moved that one? Somebody just did. Councillor Valeria, second. Councillor White, thank you. All in favor, and that's carried. Councillor reports, Councillor Sanjanko.
Just a couple of quick things to report in on. I will also say that we had a good meeting with a couple of staff members from the Ministry of Jobs and Tourism last week as a council, and I'm glad to hear that they also met with Donna from the Chamber. I think there's some good pieces that we can follow up with for some just local community economic development, starting with the business walks that Donna talked about today. So it's something I'll definitely be following up with as well. Just reporting that I am part of the board of the SOWN network. That's the Self-Employed Women's Network. And I think it's just important to let council and the public know that the progress plan is now over, as we know, but it's nice to know that it's a project that is not ending in lots of ways. So the Self-Employment Women's Network has a website launched. They're starting to figure out their memberships. They're getting a lot of interest figuring out their next event, so staying connected with that as well. And yes, last night attended another Gibsons Landing Harbour Authority meeting, and they're reporting that things are definitely hopping already with the nicer weather in the harbour, getting busier already.
Councillor Valeria.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to highlight the Clean Air Society Educational Symposium, April 25th at the Seaside Centre, for anybody who's not busy all day Saturday. And just from the Museum and Archives Board, with the help of our CAO, looking at a federal grant for their accessibility project, and may require some more support from the town on that. I just want to spend a little bit of time on Association for Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities. There are two other councils there, so I'll be very quick. Worthwhile convention to attend. Just a quick rundown of some of the resolutions that might be of interest that came out that were actually passed there. One was that for elections that candidates only be permitted to run in one jurisdiction. There was a proposed amendment to require that they live in that jurisdiction, but that didn't get any traction. But they're coming out of that. UBCM will be running in one jurisdiction. There was Village of Tassus asking the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operation to maintain their Forest Service roads so they could have access to their communities, which made me think of tetrahedron on a slightly different level. increase the corporate income tax rate of 1%, which would go directly to municipalities. Warning labels on gas pumps for climate change, environmental bill of rights, asking the province for a declaration of right to health, environment, and a few things on tanker traffic. District of Seashell brought forward an emergency or timely resolution about audit of oil spill response. It was very impressive to see the number of newly elected officials under the age of, 50 and under. And at the end of it all, I mean, it was very worthwhile. I have to say, I did find myself wondering where we belong in such geographically awkward Vancouver Island and coastal communities. That Vancouver Island is discussed a lot. Coastal communities are a bit of an add-on. I wonder whether we also have a fair bit in common with Howe Sound and the Lower Mainland, and how, you know, I guess I'm yet to discover how those discussions take place. But so we're kind of torn between between two different geographical areas, in my opinion, after listening to this, and it's potentially an opportunity, but it does marginalize us a little bit within ABICC. That's it for me.
Yeah, I just have a question on that report. There was mention of the grant application for the museum for accessibility, and I understand from the SCRD they're on a very tight timeline, and they're really trying to push through a letter of support of the SCRD. The request is coming to, I forget if it's a committee or straight to the board, and I just want to, are we under this, I think we've received some correspondence here, and are we under the understanding that we'll just support them based on our general principles, or do we need to pass a motion there? Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, there are actually, in our case, there are 2 letters of support being requested. One is just to authenticate that we are the owner of the building, and that we're aware of their intent to retrofit it to that end. And the other one is just a general letter of support coming from myself in this case to that, you know, we have guiding principles and policies around accessibility, and that we view that as a needed improvement for a community facility. We will expect to have those letters to the museum by the end of tomorrow.
Great. I just wanted to confirm that's in the works, and my monthly report's coming next meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Lumley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't wait for Silas's monthly report. And at the ABICC, I'd have to echo Councillor Valeriot's Island Association, where we fit in there. I also came to that somewhat of a question. And I would never imagine a sticker on a gas nozzle while you're pumping gas where there's so much. They must have debated that for like an hour, you know. So it was entertaining as well as informative. A couple things, and I think part of our focus is on economic development, and part of economic development is not only creating a community that people want to live in, but seeing people reinvest in their own community. And there's 2 things. There was a chamber after hours event at Smitty's Oyster House, and it was hosted by the Sunshine Coast Kayaking, and they've expanded their business. They have a group coming, a 40-person corporate group coming in from Calgary that they can accommodate. You know, I was surprised. I said, "Do you have any kayaks?" He goes, "Oh yeah, no problem." And they have sailing charters, and they also do fishing charters that have been quite well received. And their first year, they doubled the actual sales of that business in their first year of operation. And they've also, on their own dime, attended 4 outdoor adventure shows. And these are all going to contribute to, obviously, bring Gibsons into the forefront at those shows. And they also have a school group that's going to be doing some kayaking in the spring, so they're giving back to the community. So I was really encouraged by that. And also I missed the other chamber event, which was at the Gibsons Garden Hotel, which I visited today. And they have invested reinvested a lot of their into that hotel. If you haven't had a chance, the Dennis and Shang, they're more than hospitable. If you haven't been in there since they've done their upgrades, it's quite incredible the amount of work they've put into that. It's a very nice place, and I was happy to steer some people that were sitting there eating oysters the other day. They had no place to stay, so I was happy to steer them up there, and they were happy to get them. So anyway, just a side note on people reinvesting in Gibsons. I'm quite happy. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good example of the synergies that can be obtained here. Greg and Loretta have done a terrific job with the Sunshine Coast kayaking that they developed there. My hat is off to them for sure. And actually, when we're talking about the water, there as a group, I guess it probably initiated by parents initially, but they put together a society to take over the assets for the Learn to Sail program. I've encouraged them to come as a delegation at some point to talk to us so that we can try to support them as much as possible. That program is, I really would hate to see that program die because it does, a lot of people actually plan their holidays on the Sunshine Coast around bringing their kids or grandkids up to that program. So again, it's an example of community members rising to something, and we have to try to find ways to support them. Lastly, myself and Councillor Valeria did a bit of a walkabout with Member of Parliament John Weston, just to get him on side with our application to the Build Canada Fund for the improvements that we need to our wastewater system. And actually the disability thing was raised, I think, at the same time, because that's also a federal grant. So that's it. Any last inquiries before we go and find out whether the Canucks are done? Yeah. Okay, a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Sanjenko, Councillor Valeria, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks for coming.